boardroom. This is the business of esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With YouGov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with YouGov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Barada. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. And best of all, we get to do it live every Wednesday. Jimmy, how you doing this week? Jimmy, I think you're muted. I don't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Sorry, guys. I was going to say it's great, Paul. No Lindsay this week, so everyone gets to hear how I'm doing for a change. I'm doing great. My wife and I are expecting any day now, so a lot of big changes coming up for 2023, which is exciting.
You may need to run at any moment, so we'll keep this short just in case.
Yes. I have my phone with me on standby, but yeah, otherwise happy to talk esports with everyone and gaming news, but we'll see how it goes.
You have a plan. You have a like almost like a fire exit plan that you've rehearsed. Is that how it goes?
Got the go bags packed. Car fully gassed. Yeah, I don't know what else. My wife made like a custom printout pamphlet of all the things that she expects of me during the delivery process. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet. Yeah.
In other words, you've got your Nintendo Switch and your Razer like mobile gaming thing.
I joked that I wanted to beat God of War, so would the hospital have a hookup for that? Because I would probably be bored, in there at some point, and didn't go over well.
I think that makes entirely too much sense. Well, let's jump into it. We've got a good amount of news this week. Some esports news, some call it more metaverse-y kind of things. But I think it's worth starting off with China, because China, it's a saga we've been following here. And the latest news here this is from the South China Morning Post, saying China gaming crackdown, sales shrink for the first time in 2 decades amid regulatory pressure, slowing economy. So the decline marks the first drop in game sales in China since figures became available in 2003. Challenges include limited R&D activities, tighter recruitment market, weak investment confidence, and declining consumer expenditure. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought sort of noticeably absent from this list of challenges was, the core of it, which is the regulatory stuff, even though it's in the headline. But are we finally seeing sort of what we've been talking about, Jimmy, where eventually you're going to scare people away and that results in the sector shrinking there?
It's what we've been discussing, I think, for a while now. I know that we had some cool guests from East Coast Global, which is a brand that takes companies to China to kind of monetize and expand their brand in that region. Honestly, I'm a little concerned or confused by the premise, and maybe you can help clarify for me, because there was a whole host of regulatory issues about a year ago. Are we to believe that there was no decline in gaming around then. This is the first time since 2003. Well, what about last year? Weren't there massive sales declines when Fortnite was pulling out and you had PUBG that was kind of declining over there as well? I'm just kind of confused by this headline, because if anything, I thought that they just reopened everything and we're finally getting back to where they were pre-2022. So I'm a little confused by the premise, I think. But
Yeah, first of all, welcome, Lindsay. Jimmy was celebrating that we got to ask we got to ask him how he's doing this week, since you weren't
Yeah, sorry, but I'm here now.
The Chinese gaming market. So I think, to your point, Jimmy, the article here says this is about the slump in 2022, right? So you've got to think it's like all the things they were doing in 2021 that basically had negative impact, and in 2022 that had a negative impact on 2022, and now we're seeing that decline. Now, if they reverse some of those things, could 2023 be an up year? Maybe, but I'm not too shocked on the timing, right? Like, this is a bit of a trailing indicator of all the sort of the poor policy making. Lindsay, yeah, feel free to jump in here if you have thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, without knowing too much, I also think that we've obviously seen the industry as a whole shrink in 2022, just because people are actually getting outside and doing other things again. So this has been like one of the first years that the total value of the industry has shrunk, I think, ever. It may have been ever. So some of that can also be attributed to that, I'm sure. But policy is probably the bigger issue here.
Could it be all just a big PR stunt, guys? Let me just read this last part of the article where it says, a commentary by the People's Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's official mouthpiece, late last year, in other words, late 2022, described video gaming as an industry of great significance to the country's industrial layout and technological innovation. There was also a report from the semi-official Video Gaming Association that said the gaming addiction problem, quote, among minors has been basically solved. Like, is this a case where, you start the fire so you can go in and save the family and look like a hero, but even though you're the person that set the house on fire, right? Like, they vilify gaming so that they can then have all this PR around how they've solved gaming or the problems of gaming.
I mean, this is in line with how they deal with a lot of issues, and constantly changing stance and taking credit for things. So I don't think that this necessarily was intentional, but the back and forth and always making yourself be the one who looks good is pretty in line with the CCP. So
I think it's quite the conspiracy theory, but we're seeing a lot of those come true. So I don't know what's going on these days.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about another conspiracy theory here, because this article has been making the rounds big time. And this is Gala Games. Gala Games announces partnership with Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. So they were this is a company that makes essentially Web3 games, or blockchain based games or NFT games. And they're a subsidiary of Zynga. And they put a post, I think it was a Twitter post, announcing that The Rock and Mark Wahlberg were going to be involved with one of their projects. Now, what has happened, it's not in this article. What has happened is they've since deleted the post. So I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going around here, but I'm curious what you guys think, especially in the context of celebrities on the in this whole FTX sort of saga getting burned because they were pushing, the whole FTX fraud. So I'm curious what you guys think of this. Look, it's Web3 gaming. It's still gaming. Worth talking about here. Announcing The Rock and Mark Wahlberg being linked to Gala Games, and then them pulling this post. Lindsay, I don't know if you have thoughts on this.
Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Jimmy, you go first.
Sure. The Rock and Wahlberg are two very likable, massive public figures. I don't think that anything they touch goes to gold. I don't think that just because you have names like that attached to any business means it's going to be a success. I think that there is a lot of power and weight there, but if it's not going to work in one community, it's going to be the gaming community, right? Because we're inherently distrustful of outsiders. I think that's why Henry Cavill, for example, is so well received, and I'd be a lot more hyped on this if this was Cavill's name was attached to this release. But the huge kicker here, and I think the real focus is what you mentioned in the second half of the story, Paul, and that's that it was removed, right? So either it was an accurate release that was premature and then got pulled for whatever reason, or an inaccurate release because something wasn't finalized and again pulled for whatever reason. Either way, the fact that it was removed is troublesome, and you can only read into that negatively. I don't see a positive takeaway from announcing this massive partnership with these massive Hollywood figures and then having to take it down. Like I don't any explanation that you offer to me, no matter how plausible, doesn't mean that that this wasn't a mistake in some capacity. So
yeah, I mean, there's like very innocuous reasons they could have taken it down, right? Like maybe the announcement was supposed to be in March and not now, right? And someone just jumped the gun. I think that's not that interesting of a conversation. To me, the most interesting conversation is, and first of all, let me just be clear, like what they had posted in their Discord was that these guys were going to be involved in some film projects that Gala Games was developing that had tokens and blockchain involved, that will have collectible digital items, and it's going to use the Gala token, like typical Web3 nonsense. But the interesting sort of question I have is, do you think this is Mark Wahlberg and The Rock looking at what's been going on in the world saying, whoa, wait a second, maybe we don't want to be a part of this? Like maybe they agreed to this a year ago, and now the world has changed and they're going, we don't want to be a part of this, so let's slow down. Or do you think it's the company that has changed course or changed their mind for whatever reason? But maybe, there was some backlash. I don't know. Like, do you think this was driven by the celebrities pulling out, or do you think it's a more innocuous explanation that maybe it was just announced too soon?
So I will say that, first of all, I'm actually massive fans of both The Rock and Mark Wahlberg. Like, I don't watch like any movies, but I'll watch any movie starring them. So it's hilarious that these are the two people that are in this story. But I think probably it's more the company jumping the gun and announcing this before anything was truly formalized or fully set up. I think it's probably like a mix. That's what I read this as, is someone got really excited to share this and shared it before they had officially crossed their T's, dotted their I's, and then kind of had to walk it back a little bit, especially since this was a smaller thing for filming. And I'm also wondering too, if when that happened, if Mark Wahlberg and The Rock didn't pull out just because of, I don't know, maybe the pay was low or whatever it might be. But to me, this feels like a very early way to announce such a big partnership. Like there's no press release, there's nothing. Like this is kind of a simple post on social media. So I feel like this was we got too excited about it kind of thing, and now we have to backtrack.
Good point. A tweet and a Discord post feels like, given the size of The Rock and Mark Wahlberg's fan base feels like underperforming a little bit. Let's move on. Let's talk about it. I have a sort of two other, call it Web3 metaverse-y kind of stories here that I wanted to make a bit of a theme out of. And this next article is about the Australian Open, which is, I think, happening now or starting soon. And this one, the headline is Australian Open 2023 takes swing at Roblox metaverse. Now, the interesting part of the article to me was, obviously the Australian Open is creating a metaverse for this year's tournament. They can explore the park. It's modeled after the real life version. And what's interesting is they're doing it on Roblox. More interesting even than that is last year, they did a similar activation, but they did it on Decentraland. And so, the take I'm curious to get from you guys is, what do you make of, a big brand like the Australian Open? This is a very big sports tournament. This is a very big brand. Doing an activation in Decentraland last year and very quickly moving on, basically not going back to Decentraland the year later and going to Roblox. And it's mentioned in the article, Roblox doesn't have any ability to sell NFTs or anything like that, right? They've banned the use of NFTs in their platform. So this really is sort of just a pure virtual world on Roblox. And yet that's the direction the Australian Open seems to be going. Now, one last sort of data point from the article, supposedly last year's Decentraland activation peaked at 5,000 visitors. It says, or so Blockworks was told at the time, which sounds like the author has some skepticism around that number, because I think that's more users than Decentraland has in total right now. But what do you make of the move from Decentraland to Roblox for a brand like Australian Open, and is this telling?
To me, what I think happened is they actually really liked the activation, but not the partner that they had for it. So they decided to go for a bigger one, which is actually a good sign. Decentraland is just not as big of a player as Roblox. I think we can all agree on that. But clearly there was something there that was enjoyable, fun, that got them an audience or a reaction that they wanted to get. And so they decided to move it to a bigger marketplace, which I think is pretty cool.
Jimmy, do you think part of it, because it's also sort of alluded to in the article, do you think part of it is they maybe just want a younger fan to go after?
I mean, that might be part of the choice of this specific new partnership as opposed to any other option, but that's not the decision in avoiding Decentraland for a second time, right? So I agree with Lindsay's take there. I just think it's so promising that even though they're not going with Decentraland, they're still doubling down on a metaverse activation and providing something here, right? So it shows that, yeah, we all know it wasn't 5,000, but whatever it was enough to gauge their interest. I do think, yes, Paul, that this specific partner is a reason for, or the reason behind that is targeting a younger audience. But I don't think they would have ever gone back to Decentraland. I don't think anyone would touch that today's current state.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that Roblox probably runs younger than Decentraland. So, part of me maybe thinks that Australian Open's trying to go after a younger viewer, because I think people who like tennis fans are going to watch the Australian Open one way or another, right? The question is, how do you get the 12-year-old who maybe doesn't watch tennis into the sport? This is where I think the Roblox activation makes way more sense than a Decentraland activation. Despite the fact that they did sell a decent amount of NFTs last year, I forget the exact number in the article, but like a few $1 million of NFTs that they had sold. Again, because the Australian Open is a brand that is a pretty big brand. It's one of the big majors, the tennis tournaments. But I think this is my suspicion is this is about age. This is about audience. And I suspect they saw the declining numbers on Decentraland, and that had to factor into, when you look at Roblox with 40, however million, 45 million, 43 million, daily active users versus a Decentraland that has, maybe 430 daily active users. Part of the decision making there is where, what are we exposing our brand to? And I'm sure that factored in as well. One last metaverse story, guys, here before we get back to esports. But this is the headline is L'Oreal invests in metaverse startup. Not the most creative headline ever. Digital Village, it says, raised a total of $4 million in the round from Bold and other investors. So this is a metaverse as a service platform. It allows brands to develop blockchain-enabled 3D spaces from end to end. It was made through L'Oreal's corporate venture fund, Bold. They raised $4 million. And there was a statement from the L'Oreal's chief metaverse and Web3 officer. Is the most lame title of all time. Said in the statement that Digital Village's tools will be powerful enablers for our brands, adding they share similar ideas of sustainability, accessibility, and interoperability in the metaverse or Web3. Thoughts on this, guys? Thoughts on a company, pretty old, stodgy consumer packaged goods company like L'Oreal, investing through their corporate venture arm in a metaverse as a service startup. What do you think of the company they invested in, if you have thoughts on that, and what do you think of sort of L'Oreal's involvement here? Should they be involved? Does it make sense? And does this make
just
sense specifically?
I don't really see the fit here. I don't know if L'Oreal's target consumer is a metaverse or Web3 interested individual. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm out of touch with that part of the market. But on the other end, I was at TwitchCon San Diego, and one of the busiest and largest booth spaces was actually doing makeup for gamers before they go on stream. So it was pretty cool to see them do that. I still don't see the fit. This is not my expertise. That's my only takeaway, honestly, guys, is that TwitchCon had a massive booth for gamer, people, and the line was out the door, for people wanting to do makeup and see that on stream. But that's a physical in-person thing for people to get ready. I mean, is this going to be some type of digital? I just don't know what this looks like. It's still too like, how do we visualize what this activation, what this partnership really yields? Are they going to be doing some type of like Snapchat type of face filters for people that when they go on stream? Is it something else entirely? I have more questions than answers at this point.
I have some ideas about that for sure, because the main way that the beauty industry has been growing is through vloggers and TikTokers and different makeup tutorials and all that kind of stuff. That's been a huge way for people to learn and have that grow in popularity. So I can imagine a world in which people are able to basically have customized services for themselves, like even necessarily beyond filters, Jimmy, like being able to test out different products or learn application of different products in even more direct way than they would if they were, say, watching a TikTok influencer who was using their products. So I think that I think that legacy brands like this are going to have to get a lot smarter about advertising, because the next step from, TikTok is like bringing it actually straight to the consumer in a way that they can test it. And we have the tech to do that, obviously. I don't know. I mean, I think you said 4 million, which is fairly small for a huge company. And obviously, we don't know a lot about what their strategy is, but it seems like this is a good thought and where I expect some brands to go. I don't expect the final product to be branded as Web3 at all. I imagine it's going to be like, try on makeup in your home, or, it'll be something that people don't even realize that they're engaging with a Web3 or blockchain product. It's just kind of the next iteration in how they're able to like very directly engage with their consumers beyond that TikTok influencer YouTube video tutorial type. So that's my take.
Yeah, I agree on some fronts with both of you guys. Like Jimmy, on your point, it feels to me. Let me start with what I think L'Oreal missed here. The metaverse activation, I think, is great. It's great that they're experimenting. It's great that they're thinking about it. It's great that it's on their radar. But they missed the whole gaming opportunity, right? Like I feel like they really glossed over the whole gaming opportunity and didn't do anything there, when that is probably the more immediate, lowest hanging fruit. And they missed it in a big way. And so it's one of these things where I feel like they've latched on to the hottest current thing, but they've missed what is probably the even bigger, more immediate opportunity. Now, on the metaverse front, what's puzzling, what I give them kudos for, is that they're trying things, and it's great that they're thinking ahead and where things are going. And Lindsay, to your point, I also think there's a limit to how many influencers and TikTokers and things you can really activate. At some point, that becomes a really competitive, saturated place when you have 1 billion people doing makeup tutorials. And so where do you go next? Where's your consumer going next? Good that they're thinking about metaverse. The spending 4 million, it's not 4 million, but putting it in a company like this, this could be literally the most generic metaverse company I've ever heard of, right? Like I've probably seen 10,000 companies like this doing, we're building metaverses, whatever that means. And then an equally kind of empty statement saying they share similar ideals of sustainability, accessibility, and interoperability. Like, what does that mean? None of these metaverses are sustainable, accessible, or interoperable. Literally, it's the antithesis of everything mentioned here. And so, it feels like lip service, and most importantly, it feels like they fundamentally don't understand how metaverse affects their business. That's the most worrisome part. So they get the gold star for trying. It's unfortunate, though, that effort is probably going to be a failure. And I don't think that should discourage them. But I think L'Oreal is one of those companies that probably can't make this work internally on their own. They probably need outside help to figure these things out. It's just not a company set up internally to figure these things out. So, clear to me that they don't understand what they're going after here, but I give them kudos for at least trying to go after it. I'll read the comment from Hercules here. English is not my first language. I always wanted to ask this. You're seeing it all through a business and C-suite lens. What's a C-suite? Is it inferior to A and B suites? Am I missing something? I mean, some people might say it's inferior, but C-suite, Hercules, refers to people with a C in their title. So like CEO, CMO, CFO, CSO, CTO. So Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer, Chief Executive Officer. People like top management is what the C-suite refers to, and what I referred to in my opening. All right, guys. One last article here. One last news story here before we wrap things up. And this is our good friend Arnold Herr from Genji, who we had on the podcast, who spoke about this, in fact, on the podcast, what he dubbed the esports winter. And the headline here is Genji CEO offers grim prediction on esports future. I fear the worst is his quote here. This was in an Ask Me Anything on the League of Legends subreddit. And he was asked about his confidence in the League of Legends esports leagues in North America and South Korea financially, and said he is, quote, extremely concerned. Now, he says, I've been saying the esports winter is coming, but even I didn't think it would be this cold. Now I've changed my forecast and think 30% plus teams of esports teams worldwide won't make it the next 2 years. He also explained that he thinks leagues that rely on media and brand sponsorships won't survive, and publishers finding other ways to create revenue for their events and teams is key, which he repeated on our podcast, by the way, where on our episode where he said that, these leagues needed to allow teams to monetize through more in-game activations. And he also mentioned, brands are cutting costs. They're turning away from marketing. They're spending less dollars on their marketing budgets, etc. So he's fearful. What do you guys think of Arnold's comments here? And specifically, he aimed it at League of Legends esports, which up until now we've not sort of talked about with any kind of risk. You know what I mean? Like it's always been very kind of shiny talk around anything League of Legends. What do you make of Arnold's comments here, Jimmy?
Well, like you said, Paul, he was just on the show talking about this esports winter that's coming. Kind of a grim prediction at the time, and something that we've seen unfold since then, in the months since then, with so many orgs that are firing or restructuring and trying to figure it out. I think the core of his point, the current esports ecosystem and structure is just not something that can continue, right? It needs to evolve. I'm looking forward to, for example, the launch of the 1047 Games title Splitgate, because that should have a different structure with their teams that I'm excited to learn about. I'm looking forward to seeing the numbers from Valorant in comparison to League, because they changed that up to benefit the teams a little bit more. But yeah, you can't deny that when you lose sponsors and when teams are look at FaZe's stock, right? When they're either based off of clout and reputation, or just based off of a failing business model where you spend, $50 million to make 40, something has to give. And I think if you look at what's working in this space, it's the game makers themselves, the developers and the publishers, and it's the individual streamers and the talent, right? I think content creators are doing very well for themselves. I don't know why any content creator right now would sign on with any type of org, just because I think they could do better solo, honestly, depending on their size, of course. But having, having seen that that's kind of what's working and what's not working, I think to Arnold's point, if you're a competitive esports org like Gen G, which is focused on winning and tournament play, as opposed to a hoodie org, or even just more of a lifestyle brand org that likes making fun content, fun memes, growing a fan base, competing here and there, but really just gaming in general, not esports specifically. I think something has to change directly from the developers and the publishers, where the teams have more upside, more of a share in what's going on. That's something that we didn't just hear from Arnold, by the way. I know we heard that from Greg Selko at our PAX panel when we were live at PAX in Boston last year. I'm sure we've heard that from others. Honestly, Paul, I think it's a common complaint amongst the teams that they deliver a lot of value to these games. They're not getting a lot back. So yeah, I'm looking forward. I think in particular, I'm looking forward to see how Valorant plays out. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Splitgate, how the launch of Splitgate is, as far as like my own personal preferences.
Lindsay, any thoughts or?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Jimmy said. The one thing I'll add is I do feel like when it comes to revenue streams and revenue models, a lot of it was kind of traditional business adapted and forced into esports. And I don't think that there has been a lot of time for revenue models to organically grow based on what fans are wanting and what people are actually spending their money on. And especially when you're talking about so much free content being a huge part of it, and then you're trying to inject kind of traditional revenue models that definitely do not start off with so much free. I think it can be really hard to adapt those. It's never exciting when an industry starts to do more poorly. The only like the positive about it is the things that work tend to emerge and create longer lasting foundations. Obviously, the short term pain for the long term gain is really not fun for all the people that are affected. And I do feel so bad for everyone that's if scared right now of their own futures. But I hope that in the long run, it winds up leading to more successful revenue models, to better team based structures, to a real value add for content creators who I think Jimmy is right. There's not a ton of value add from joining an org right now. Um, or at least it's not necessarily as clear and defined. So I do have hope that this will actually be a good thing in the long run. But for right now, it sucks and it's sad.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay, I think that was insightful on the front of like the business models that have been applied here worked in other places, but didn't necessarily were never necessarily suited for esports, right? And so a rethink there is not necessarily a bad thing. The challenge is, even though there's a lot of people like Arnold who are speaking up, I don't know if there's a lot of listening going on, right? Like I haven't seen a lot of changes in the business model. Like I still don't see many games doing in-game activations for esports teams, right? Like there's just not, even though that is sort of what almost everyone now is asking for, I still haven't seen it. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves. The other thing out of the article that was his 30% number, like, and that he could be spot on. That's how many teams will fail. But I also think there will be consolidation. And the question I have for you guys, for everybody really is, will scale matter, right? Will consolidation solve some of the problems? In other words, will, some of the smaller failing teams get swallowed up by the bigger, maybe a little bit more liquid teams, not liquid the team, but the ones that have more cash, have healthier balance sheets. Will getting to a larger scale solve some of the business model problems, or does that just exacerbate them, right? That hasn't really been tested yet, right? Because there's no esports org that has achieved the scale of an NFL franchise, for example. And so that to me is also one thing I think worth watching. Will consolidation solve some of the problem, or do we really need sort of a change in the business model, 30% of sort of the bottom to fail, and a rethink and a reset, and then we come out of it stronger, right? There's that possibility as well. So that's sort of what I'm looking at and what I'm watching, and I think it will be interesting to pay attention to. Guys, that wraps up this week's episode. I hope you guys are enjoying the shorter, punchier weekly news episodes. Give us feedback if you do like it, if you don't. Don't forget, follow Business of Esports everywhere on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Twitter, you name it, on all platforms, YouTube, subscribe. And we do this every Wednesday. So don't forget, come every Wednesday. We appreciate everyone being here. Don't forget the most important thing, the future is fun. We'll see you guys next week.